For a long time, the idea of reincarnating as an animal was ridiculed, ignored, or treated as heresy within certain spiritualist circles. Many consider such a notion absurd, outside the logic of spiritual evolution. But what if this idea were not only possible, but deeply connected to the purest kind of love a soul can carry? What if Allan Kardec, the very codifier of Spiritist doctrine, had received revelations confirming that, in extremely rare cases, a human spirit can indeed manifest, by mission and never by punishment, in the form of an animal? This topic, often avoided out of fear or ignorance, opens an entirely new window into our understanding of life after death, reincarnation, and above all, the transformative power of spiritual love. Because perhaps that animal that came into your life at your most difficult moment was not just a coincidence. Maybe it came for a reason that human logic cannot grasp, but which spirituality explains with precision and serenity. Throughout this video, you will discover what the superior spirits have revealed about this possibility. You will understand why certain emotional bonds can even transcend the barrier of species, and why, in the face of separation and pain, a soul might choose to return, not with words but with presence. If you've ever felt that an animal knew more than it should, if you've ever had a sensation of reunion without explanation, or if you simply wish to expand your view on what it means to reincarnate, then stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear has the power to forever change the way you see the invisible bonds that unite us across worlds. There are bonds that do not dissolve with death. And this is precisely what intrigues those who approach spiritual truths with a sensitive heart and an awakened mind. In his methodical and respectful investigation of spiritual reality, Allan Kardec brought to the world not only answers, but new questions that challenge our limited understanding of the soul, its bonds, and its journey. Among the most impactful revelations found in the codification is one that, at first glance, may seem absurd to human logic. The spirit of a loved one may, under extraordinary circumstances, manifest or even temporarily incarnate in the form of an animal. This is not a punitive return, nor a regression in the evolutionary path. We are facing a rare and profound phenomenon motivated by emotional bonds that surpass ordinary comprehension. Those who have lost someone abruptly or painfully know how unbearable the physical absence can feel. It's in these moments that many report inexplicable experiences, such as the presence of an animal that suddenly appears, bringing with it a behavior, a gaze, or even an energy strongly reminiscent of the departed loved one. Spiritism does not dismiss these possibilities. On the contrary, it invites us to analyze them with calm and study. In conversations with the superior spirits, Kardec learned from them that true love is an active force, one that operates even across the planes of existence. And when this love is strong enough, it can lead the spirit to make extraordinary choices. A high-level spirit, of its own will, may come close again to the one it loves, even using a lower form, when the spiritual mission requires it. Not out of need for learning at that stage, but as a conscious choice of service, support, and continuation of a bond. In most cases, animals are inhabited by less complex spiritual principles, still in the early stages of individualized consciousness. However, there are exceptions in which the spiritual presence manifested is more than just instinct. These are expressions of love that, unable to be expressed in human form, use what is available at the time. This is not fantasy, nor exaggerated sentimentality. It is the real action of a soul that loves and that wishes to protect, console, or simply be near. This is why so many mediums often report perceiving spiritual bonds manifesting through non-human forms. And it is also why many people, even without doctrinal knowledge, intuitively feel that that animal is not just any animal. It carries something more, a trait, a look, a mission. Though rare, these cases are significant enough to force us to rethink the boundaries of what we call spiritual identity. After all, if the soul is eternal and love is its purest force, why would we limit its expression to human form alone? Could it be that the body, rather than the purpose, is what defines the greatness of a spirit? This reflection inevitably leads us to deepen our understanding of the spiritual choice that precedes a new incarnation, especially when it occurs outside conventional patterns. The idea that a human spirit could, even after countless existences on the earthly plane, choose to be reborn in the form of an animal, challenges what we think we understand about the evolutionary scale. However, to grasp it clearly, we must let go of the materialistic prejudices that still cloud our spiritual vision. Reincarnation, according to the superior spirits, is not a mechanical and unchanging process, but one deeply governed by the laws of love, justice, and conscious freedom. Throughout the codification, Allan Kardec makes it clear that there is no regression in the soul's progress. Once a certain degree of rational consciousness is achieved, the spirit does not go backward as punishment or spiritual failure. However, there are missions of such moral grandeur that they demand sacrifices unthinkable by human logic. Among these sacrifices is the voluntary, always voluntary, choice to assume lower forms for one purpose only: to serve. There are elevated spirits who, free from the pride and vanity that still limit so many of us, understand that their presence alongside a loved one, even through a rudimentary body, can bring healing, protect destinies, or support someone in times of deep emotional fragility. They do this not out of obligation, they do it out of love. A love so clear that it accepts silencing reason, holding back speech, and acting only through instinct, because it understands that this is the only way to remain present and helpful in the life of someone in need. This kind of incarnation, as the spirits explain, does not aim at the spirit's own progress. It is an exception, a sublime act of sacrifice, and precisely because of this, it occurs in the rarest of cases. When deep spiritual reasons are involved, such as atonement for guilt, the fulfillment of a promise made in the spiritual realm, or the protection of someone whose earthly journey still requires direct support, it's important to emphasize that in these situations, the animal body does not contain the same expressive capacities as the human body. The spiritual consciousness present there operates with natural limitations of the form it chose to inhabit. It does not think, speak, or reason, but it feels. And this feeling, often silent, is precisely the channel through which its mission flows. The spirit is not limited to what our eyes perceive. In taking on this role, it does not lose its essence or regress. On the contrary, it manifests, with humility and greatness, the highest in its spiritual journey. To renounce what it has achieved in order to serve another is perhaps one of the purest forms of Christian love that Kardec so praised. In Spiritist centers and serious mediumistic reports, there are testimonies that confirm this possibility, not as a rule, but as a sacred exception. And when one understands the logic behind it, the understanding of reincarnation expands to much broader horizons than we normally imagine. The soul, in its freedom, can choose unexpected paths, when those paths mean faithfulness to a greater love. And it is precisely this unusual choice, this spiritual presence manifested in the silence of instinct, that helps us understand how certain inexplicable behaviors in animals may actually be subtle manifestations of memories, affections, and bonds from other lives. Throughout history, curious reports about the behavior of certain animals have caught the attention of sensitive observers. These are not invented stories, but real testimonies repeated in different parts of the world, raising a question that unsettles materialist reason. How to explain a dog crying before a portrait of someone it never met? How to understand a cat occupying the exact same spot where a deceased relative used to sit, as if recognizing a familiar energy there? Or a bird that persistently responds only to one specific name, ignoring all others? When we analyze these phenomena through the lens of Spiritist doctrine, we stop seeing them as mere coincidences. Allan Kardec, with his investigative method and balanced stance, understood that behaviors deviating from the norm deserve to be seriously examined. And among the hypotheses admitted by the superior spirits is the possibility that, in very specific cases, spirits with intense emotional bonds may retain fragments of their memory, or even part of their emotional vibration when manifesting in simpler forms. It's important to understand that the spirit, in choosing to incarnate in a body that limits its higher faculties, like that of an animal, does not completely erase its memories and feelings. It retains them in latent form, and at certain moments, when the environment's vibration, the presence of a loved one, or a specific memory arises, those memories can surface, even if in a rudimentary way. Conventional science cannot explain this, but Spiritism shows us True affection transcends biological limitations. What may seem to many as merely strange behavior is, in fact, the expression of a connection that resists time and death. There are records of dogs crying specifically in front of objects belonging to deceased former guardians. Cats that nestle into old clothing, seeking something they recognize without understanding. And birds that sing phrases or melodies spoken only by someone who has passed, phrases they were never taught. Mediumship, in its diversity, also provides important confirmations. Clairvoyant mediums frequently report the presence of human spirits around specific animals, revealing that there is more than just an animal spiritual principle present. There is a conscious being, though temporarily limited by the form it inhabits, who is there out of love, protection, or mission. Kardec teaches us that the spirit is influenced by its moral condition, but also by its purpose. And when the purpose is to remain present to support another being, even if it means inhabiting a body inferior to what it's used to, it humbly accepts this role. But its presence leaves traces, and these traces manifest in gestures, habits, and reactions that defy all known logic. If we look more closely, we'll see that not everything in animal behavior can be attributed to instinct. Some reactions, emotions, and interactions reveal a consciousness beyond raw nature. And when this is manifested alongside someone who suffers, who has lost, or who hasn't yet overcome an absence, the bond becomes even more visible and more sacred. These manifestations do not occur to impress. They are silent expressions of a spiritual commitment. They are marks of a promise made beyond life, fulfilled discreetly, but powerfully. And it is precisely in this ability of the spirit to be present, even without words, that we find one of the greatest proofs that true love transcends any limitation imposed by physical form. There comes a point in the spiritual journey when love becomes greater than any language. It no longer needs words, explanations, or recognition. It simply is, silent, constant, absolute. And it is at this most subtle level of emotional connection that we begin to understand the phenomena involving animals that apparently go beyond the limits of ordinary behavior. There are countless reports of animals remaining faithful to people who are no longer with us. Cases in which a horse lies down day after day on its former owner's grave, or a dog that walks, with precision, the same route a person used to take in life, even though it was never trained to do so. There are accounts of parrots that keep repeating phrases spoken only by a deceased loved one, phrases they could not have learned from anyone else. Spiritist doctrine teaches us that a spirit can manifest partially, through direct influence on the intelligent principle present in animals. In some cases, the animal is merely a sensitive instrument that picks up the vibration of the spirit accompanying it and acts as an emotional reflection of that presence. In others, as we've already addressed, there is the possibility of a spirit, by mission or higher choice, temporarily inhabiting that animal body. Kardec never set reason aside in his investigations, but he also knew that certain phenomena require the soul to perceive at a higher level. Love that transcends species cannot be explained by logic alone. It is proven by the deep feeling generated in those who witness such occurrences. It is as if the veil between worlds grows thinner, and for a few moments it becomes possible to perceive that we are, in fact, accompanied by presences that never abandoned us. These bonds, however difficult for materialist thinking to comprehend, are natural to those who understand the spirit as an immortal essence and love as the structuring force of the universe. True affection does not depend on physical form or verbal language. It communicates through gestures, looks, presence. And presence, even when silent, can change the life of someone still walking through suffering. Spiritism does not romanticize these cases. It studies them seriously, respecting the limits of reason, while also recognizing the signs of the soul. And in investigating these manifestations, the doctrine shows us that love, when sincere, knows no species boundaries. It acts wherever possible, however possible, to keep the bond alive between two spirits who love each other. That is why, when we observe animals with extraordinary behaviors, we should not rush to label them merely as intelligent or sensitive. In some of them, there may be more than heightened instinct. There may be a living, conscious, devoted spiritual presence, a spirit that chose to remain beside someone still in need of support, even if that support comes without voice or reasoning. And it is precisely that choice which leads us to an even deeper revelation about the nature of reincarnation and spiritual progress. Because if it is true that the soul does not regress in its evolution, it is also true that there are missions so sublime they require forms that defy human logic. Throughout all of Allan Kardec's investigations, one truth remained firm, always revealed clearly by the superior spirits. The spirit does not go backward. Evolution is progressive, continuous, and governed by laws that do not admit regression. This statement, however, must be precisely understood, because what we call evolution is not just intellectual or moral advancement. It is, above all, an expansion of the capacity to love. And this is where many certainties begin to be revisited. The spirit does not return to animal form as punishment or as a consequence of mistakes, but it may, in the rarest and most extraordinary of cases, choose to temporarily inhabit that form as a gesture of complete surrender, driven by a love so profound that it does not measure sacrifice. This is a mission, not a fall. It is the voluntary renunciation of everything achieved intellectually in order to fulfill a higher purpose. Once this is understood, everything changes. The idea of spiritual presence stops being something distant or symbolic and becomes a concrete, perceptible, active reality. Reincarnation ceases to be just a process of individual progress and becomes an instrument of service to others. And the relationship between humans and animals gains new meaning. In certain cases, before us may stand, silently, a spirit that chose to love in silence, without recognition, without glory, without words, but with total fidelity to its commitment. This revelation transforms not only how we view animals, but also how we see ourselves as evolving spirits. If there are souls capable of such renunciation, we are faced with an essential question. To what extent are we willing to serve, to give up our spiritual comfort for the sake of another? The example from these cases is silent, but deeply stirring, because it calls us to humility, to vigilance, and to the true practice of love that expects nothing in return. Kardec did not end the codification with all the answers. On the contrary, he left us the method, the path, so that we may continue investigating, observing, and feeling. And over time, new phenomena, like these that challenge our understanding of the soul and its manifestation in different forms, have reaffirmed what the doctrine has always upheld. The spirit is free, and love is sovereign. Once we know this, we no longer look at an animal the same way. We no longer treat it as a lesser being, devoid of spiritual value. We begin to see it as a living possibility of presence, of mission, of real connection. Even if we cannot say with certainty who inhabits that simple body, the respect born from that understanding is in itself an expression of our own moral elevation. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. The spirit is not defined by form. It is defined by the choices it makes, the bonds it maintains, and its ability to serve without losing itself. It is this awareness that prepares us to recognize, with reverence, each living being as a divine possibility of the love that unites us beyond death, beyond species, beyond time. If all this is true, if a spirit can, out of love, choose to be reborn as an animal to protect, comfort, or accompany the one it loves, then our responsibility for how we treat every living being changes completely. We are no longer dealing only with instincts and behaviors. We are facing profound spiritual possibilities, which require respect, sensitivity, and soul listening. Spiritism teaches us that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and when an elevated spirit accepts to silence its reason in order to manifest solely through the presence of an animal, it reveals to us the highest level of spiritual mission, to serve without needing to be recognized. Now I ask you, have you ever stood before a spiritual reunion and not realized it? Could it be that the gaze that stayed with you during your darkest moments was more than just instinct? And what if a love from the past is, right now, closer to you than ever before? If this content moved you, share in the comments what touched your heart the most. Your experience could help others see beyond the material. And if you want to keep expanding your awareness about spirituality, reincarnation, and life purpose according to Spiritist doctrine, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Because here, we don't just talk about life, we talk about eternity.